On July 25th, 2015, a crowd gathered outside a warehouse in Detroit. They weren't there for a concert. They weren't there for a protest. They were there for an unveiling. Inside that warehouse sat a bronze statue, 8.5 feet tall, 2 tons of metal. It had taken 3 years to create, cost over $100,000, and sparked outrage across the country before anyone had even seen it. When the doors opened, there it was. A winged figure sitting on a throne, the head of a goat, horns curling upward, breasts on a muscular torso, one hand pointing up, one hand pointing down, and at its feet, 2 children gazing up in adoration. The crowd erupted. Some cheered, others screamed. Protesters waved crosses and shouted prayers. The media exploded with headlines. The demon had returned. His name was Baphomet. But here's what most people in that crowd didn't know. Baphomet was never real. He was invented in a torture chamber in 1307 by a French king who needed to destroy the richest military order in Christendom. The Knights Templar never worshipped this demon. They didn't kiss his feet or spit on the cross or deny Christ. They were tortured until they confessed to it, under the strappado, under the rack, under the threat of burning. They confessed to worshipping an idol, and when their torturers asked them to describe it, they said whatever they thought might make the pain stop. Some said it was a head, others said a cat. Some described a bearded man, others a 3-faced demon. Some said it had the head of a goat. They were describing Baphomet, but they were really describing whatever their tortured minds could invent to survive another day. The confessions were lies. The demon was fiction. The Templars were executed anyway. And yet, 700 years later, we still believe in him. Occultists worship him. Christians fear him. Pop culture can't stop drawing him. Secret societies claim he represents hidden knowledge. Conspiracy theorists say the Templars survived, escaped with their treasure, and founded Switzerland, pointing to the Swiss flag as proof, an inverted Templar cross hiding in plain sight. A lie told under torture became the world's most famous demon. Before we continue this story, I want to ask you something. If you believe these dark myths, strange histories, and forgotten legends are worth remembering, if you believe that the monsters of our past still have lessons to teach us, you can help us continue this work by liking this video and subscribing to the Midnight Archives. Your support keeps the candle lit and allows us to keep exploring the shadows of history. Tonight we will open the file on Baphomet. We will trace his origins from a medieval torture chamber to the bronze statue in Detroit, from a false confession extracted through pain to the most recognizable demon in modern culture, from a lie invented to destroy warrior monks to a symbol embraced by Satanists, metalheads, and activists alike. This is not just the story of a demon. It is the story of how mythology is manufactured, how conspiracy theories take root, and how a fiction born in agony can become more real, more powerful than the truth that spawned it. To understand the demon that never existed, we must first meet the men who were destroyed for confessing to him. And to understand them, we must travel back in time to Friday, October 13th, 1307, the day that changed everything, the day the Knights Templar fell. Welcome to the Midnight Archives. Friday, October the 13th, 1307. Before dawn, across every city, town, and village in France, soldiers moved simultaneously. They had their orders, sealed letters from King Philip IV, opened at the same moment in hundreds of locations. The The orders were simple. Arrest every Knight Templar in France. By sunrise, it was over. The most powerful military order in Christendom, warrior monks who had fought in the Crusades, built a banking empire, and answered to no one but the Pope, were in chains. The charges were heresy, blasphemy, devil worship, but the real crime was much simpler. They were too rich, and the King of France was broke. Let me take you back. The Knights Templar were founded in 1119, 9 years after the First Crusade captured Jerusalem. Their original mission was simple: protect Christian pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land. 9 French knights took monastic vows: poverty, chastity, obedience, and pledged to defend the roads to Jerusalem. They were warrior monks. They prayed like clergy and fought like soldiers. King Baldwin II of Jerusalem gave them headquarters in the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which Christians believed sat on the ruins of Solomon's temple. That's where they got their name, the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, the Knights Templar. For the first decade, they were small, obscure, 9 men guarding roads. Then, in 1129, the Pope endorsed them. Suddenly, they weren't just soldiers. They were holy warriors, blessed by God Himself. Donations poured in: land, gold, castles. Within 50 years, the Templars controlled a network of fortresses across Europe and the Middle East. They became the standing army of the Crusades. Elite fighters in white mantles with red crosses, feared on the battlefield, disciplined, fanatical. They had a rule: never retreat unless outnumbered 3-1. But their real innovation wasn't warfare. It was banking. Pilgrims traveling to Jerusalem faced a problem. Carrying gold made them targets for bandits. So the Templars created a system: deposit your money at a Templar house in Paris, receive a letter of credit, withdraw your funds in Jerusalem. It was the first international banking network. They issued loans, managed estates, handled the treasuries of kings. They became so trusted that monarchs across Europe stored their wealth in Templar vaults. By the late 1200s, the Templars were arguably the most powerful organization in Europe. They had their own fleet of ships, their own laws, diplomatic immunity, and enough gold to dwarf most kingdoms. They answered only to the Pope. And that was the problem, because in 1307, King Philip IV of France, known as Philip the Fair, had run out of money. He'd waged expensive wars, debased the currency, taxed his people to the breaking point. He'd even expelled the Jews and seized their property, and it still wasn't enough. He owed massive debts, and one of his biggest creditors was the Knights Templar. Philip had tried taxing the church before. The Pope had excommunicated him for it. He'd tried arresting foreign bankers. He'd imprisoned Italian lenders and confiscated their wealth. But the Templars were different. They were monks, protected by the Pope, untouchable. Unless he could prove they weren't monks at all. Unless he could prove they were heretics. Philip needed the Templars destroyed. Not just defeated, destroyed. Their order dissolved, their assets seized, their reputation annihilated. And he knew exactly how to do it. Torture them until they confessed to devil worship. He'd done it before. Just a few years earlier, he'd accused Pope Boniface VIII of heresy, sorcery, and sodomy. Boniface died before trial, possibly murdered, and Philip had walked away clean. If he could bring down a pope, he could bring down the Templars. So Philip compiled charges. He found a former Templar named Esquin de Floiran, a disgraced member expelled from the order, who claimed to have witnessed secret Templar rituals. De Floiran said the Templars denied Christ, spat on the cross, worshipped idols, engaged in sodomy during initiation rites. Were these accusations true? Almost certainly not. But Philip didn't need truth. He needed a confession, and he knew how to get one. On Friday, October the 13th, 1307, the arrests began. Hundreds of Templars, including their Grand Master Jacques de Molay, were seized. Their properties were occupied. Their records were confiscated. And within days, the torture began. The king's inquisitors had one job: extract confessions. And they were very, very good at their job. Because under torture, the Templars confessed to everything, including worshipping a demon called Baphomet, a demon that, until that moment, had never existed. The torture of the Knights Templar was systematic. This wasn't rage. It wasn't chaos. It was bureaucracy. King Philip's inquisitors had manuals, procedures. They documented everything: the questions asked, the methods used, the confessions extracted. They kept records, and those records still exist. They tell us exactly what was done to the Templars and exactly what the Templars said to make it stop. Let's talk about the methods first. The most common was the strappado. The victim's hands are tied behind their back. A rope is attached to their wrists and thrown over a beam. Then they're hoisted into the air, their full body weight suspended from their shoulders. The pain is immediate. The shoulder joints dislocate, tendons tear. If the victim still refuses to confess, the torturer adds a refinement. They drop them, not all the way to the ground, just a few feet, then jerk the rope tight. The sudden stop wrenches the shoulders further. Sometimes it rips the arms out of their sockets entirely. One Templar, a man named Bernard de Vado, was subjected to the strappado for so long that he lost the use of his hands permanently. He couldn't hold a quill to sign his confession. They had to tie the pen to his hand. He signed anyway. Then there was the rack. The victim is strapped to a frame. Ropes are attached to their wrists and ankles. Then the ropes are slowly cranked tighter, stretching the body. The pain starts in the joints, knees, hips, shoulders. Then the ligaments begin to tear. The spine elongates. Eventually, if the torturer keeps turning, bones start to separate. The rack was considered a clean method because it didn't draw blood. That mattered to the inquisitors. The church technically forbade torture that caused mutilation or death. So they used methods that destroyed the body from the inside. Legal torture. There was also fire. The victim's feet are coated in oil or fat, then held over an open flame. Not close enough to burn the skin off. That would be mutilation. Just close enough to cook the flesh. One Templar described the smell. He said it was like pork. He confessed. And then there was the threat of worse. Because the inquisitors had a final tool. The promise that if you didn't confess, the torture would continue forever, or you'd be burned alive. Burning was the punishment for relapsed heretics, those who confessed and then recanted. The Templars knew this. They'd seen heretics burn before. They knew what it meant. So when the Inquisitor said, "Confess now, or face the fire," it wasn't hyperbole. It was a guarantee. Under this system, the Templars began to confess, not some of them, not the weak ones, nearly all of them. Out of 138 Templars interrogated in Paris, 134 confessed to at least some of the charges. They admitted to denying Christ during secret initiation rituals. They admitted to spitting on the cross, or near it, or being told to spit on it, but refusing. Whatever variation they thought the Inquisitor wanted to hear. They confessed to kissing other Templars on the mouth, the navel, the base of the spine, to being told that sodomy was permitted within the order, and they confessed to worshipping an idol. But when asked what this idol looked like, the descriptions varied wildly. Some said it was a head, just a head, sitting on an altar. Others said it was a cat, a large black or grey cat that appeared during rituals. Some described it as a bearded man. Others said it had 3 faces. Some said it was the size of a fist. Others said it was life-sized. And some, not many, but some, said it had the head of a goat. The Inquisitors seized on this. They started asking about it specifically. Did the idol have horns? Did it have a goat's head? Did you kiss its feet, its stomach, its anus? And once they started asking, the confessions became more consistent. Because torture doesn't reveal truth. It reveals what the torturer wants to hear. Let me walk you through one specific interrogation. Jean de Chalon was a Templar knight from Burgundy. He was arrested on October 13th and brought to Paris for questioning. At first, he denied everything. He said the charges were lies. The Templars were loyal Christians. He'd never seen any idol. He'd never denied Christ. So they put him on the strappado. After several hours, his shoulders dislocated. He screamed. He begged. They asked again, "Did you deny Christ?" Jean said yes. "Did you spit on the cross?" "Yes." "Was there an idol?" "Yes." "What did it look like?" And here's where it gets interesting. Jean paused, because he didn't know. There was no idol. He'd never seen one. But the Inquisitor was waiting. The rope was still cutting into his wrists. His shoulders were screaming. So he guessed. "A head," he said. "What kind of head?" "A man's head. Bearded." "Where was it kept?" In the chapter house." "What did you do with it?" "We kissed it." "Where did you kiss it?" "The feet. We kissed the feet." The Inquisitor wrote it all down. Jean's confession was entered into the record as evidence, and from that moment on, every Templar interrogated after him was asked about the head. "Did you see a head? Did you kiss it? Was it bearded?" And they said yes, because Jean had said yes. And if they said no, the torture would continue. This is how the myth of Baphomet was built. Question by question, scream by scream. One confession created the template, the next confession refined it. By the time 100 Templars had been tortured, the story had taken shape. There was an idol. It had a head, maybe a goat, maybe a man, maybe both. The Templars worshipped it during secret rituals. They kissed it. They prayed to it. They denied Christ in its name. None of it was true, but it was all on the record. Now let's talk about the name. Baphomet. Where did it come from? The word appears in some of the confessions, but not all. Some Templars called the idol Baphometus. Others said Mahomet. And here's where the theories begin. Theory 1. Baphomet is a corruption of Muhammad. The Templars had fought Muslims in the Crusades. To medieval Christians, Muhammad was a false prophet, sometimes portrayed as a demon. The French called him Mahomet. So the accusation was that the Templars had secretly converted to Islam. that their idol was Muhammad, and over time, through torture and mistranscription, Mahomet became Baphomet. It's possible, but there's no evidence the Templars worshipped Muhammad. And the descriptions of the idol don't match Islamic iconography at all. Theory 2. Baphomet is a cipher. In the early 1800s, a researcher named Joseph von Hammer-Purgstall proposed that Baphomet was an Atbash cipher, a Hebrew substitution code where the first letter of the alphabet is swapped with the last, the second with the second to last, and so on. If you reverse Baphomet in Hebrew, BVMT, using Atbash, you get Sophia. Sophia is Greek for wisdom. Von Hammer-Purgstall argued this proved the Templars possessed secret Gnostic knowledge, that they were mystics who worshipped divine wisdom in coded form. It's a beautiful theory. It's also almost certainly wrong. There's no evidence the Templars used Atbash ciphers, and the word Baphomet might not even have been Hebrew in origin. Theory 3. Baphomet means baptism of wisdom. Some scholars suggest Baphomet comes from Greek, Baphi meaning baptism, and metis meaning wisdom. This would imply some kind of initiation ritual, a baptism into secret knowledge. Again, it's speculative. There's no documentation of the Templars using this term for anything, so where did the name really come from? We'll never know. What we do know is this. By the time the trials were over, the name Baphomet had been spoken in enough confessions that it entered the historical record. A demon named Baphomet, described inconsistently, spelled differently in different documents, possibly a mangled version of Muhammad, possibly a cipher, possibly just a word the Inquisitors invented. But once it was written down, it took on a life of its own. The Templars were destroyed, but Baphomet was just beginning. On March 18th, 1314, Jacques de Molay, the Grand Master of the Knights Templar, was burned at the stake on an island in the Seine River in Paris. He'd confessed under torture, then recanted, then confessed again, then recanted again, so they burned him. As the flames rose, de Molay reportedly shouted a curse. He called on God to summon King Philip and Pope Clement V to face divine judgment within a year. Pope Clement died 1 month later. King Philip died 7 months after that. The Templars were gone. Their order was officially dissolved. Their lands were transferred to another military order, the Knights Hospitaller, though in France, Philip seized most of it for the crown. The treasure, the legendary Templar treasure that supposedly filled their vaults, was never found. And that absence is where the conspiracy theories begin. Because if the Templars were so wealthy, where did the gold go? Some say it was already gone before the arrests, that the Templars knew Philip was coming and smuggled their treasure out of France in the days before October 13th. Some say it was loaded onto ships and sailed away. But to where? That's the question that has obsessed conspiracy theorists for 700 years. And one of the most persistent answers is Switzerland. We'll get to that. But first, we need to talk about what happened to Baphomet. Because after the Templars were destroyed, the demon they'd confessed to worshipping disappeared from history. For 500 years, Baphomet was dormant, mentioned in a few obscure medieval texts, referenced by a handful of scholars, but largely forgotten. And then, in 1854, a French occultist drew a picture, and Baphomet became immortal. For 300 years after the Templar trials, Baphomet was a footnote. The name appeared in a few scattered documents, obscure histories, theological treatises. But there were no statues, no icons, no visual depictions at all. No one knew what Baphomet looked like, because Baphomet didn't exist. But in the 1700s, something shifted. Freemasonry emerged. Freemasonry started as a guild for stonemasons, then evolved into a fraternal organization focused on philosophy, ritual, and secrecy. By the early 1700s, Freemason lodges were spreading across Europe, and Freemasons loved medieval mysticism. They romanticized the old guilds, the cathedral builders, the Knights Templar. Some Freemasons began claiming a direct lineage to the Templars. They said the order hadn't been destroyed, it had gone underground, that the surviving Templars had reformed in secret and passed down their knowledge through generations, eventually becoming the Freemasons. There was no evidence for this, but it was a great story, and it connected Freemasonry to the aura of mystery surrounding the Templars, secret rituals, hidden knowledge, a connection to something ancient and powerful. By the 1800s, this idea had taken root in occult circles. Occultists began writing about the Templars as mystic heroes, not devil worshippers, but enlightened initiates who possessed secret wisdom. Gnostics, alchemists, keepers of ancient mysteries, and they started asking, what was the idol the Templars worshipped? Not in the sense of, did it exist? But in the sense of, what did it symbolize? Because if the Templars were mystics, then Baphomet must have been a symbol, a representation of hidden knowledge. And in 1854, a French occultist named Eliphas Lévy decided to give Baphomet a face. Lévy was a former Catholic priest, turned magician and philosopher. He was obsessed with symbolism, with the idea that ancient religions had encoded profound truths in their imagery. He wanted to create a symbol that represented the ultimate esoteric knowledge, a figure that embodied the union of opposites, male and female, good and evil, spirit and matter. So he drew it. He called it the Sabbatic Goat, and he labeled it Baphomet. This is the image you know, a figure sitting cross-legged, the head of a goat with curved horns, a pentagram on its forehead, breasts on a muscular, masculine torso, wings spreading from its back, one arm pointing up, one arm pointing down with the words solve and coagula written on the forearms, Latin for dissolve and coagulate, alchemical terms. Between the horns, a torch. At the lap, a caduceus, a staff with two serpents wrapped around it. It's androgynous, part human, part animal, part light, part dark. Lévy intended it as a symbol of balance, the reconciliation of all dualities. As above, so below, the merging of heaven and earth. He admitted he had no historical basis for any of this. He'd read about the Templar trials. He knew they'd confessed to worshipping an idol. He thought the name Baphomet sounded mysterious and ancient. So he drew what he imagined it might have been, and his drawing became the definitive image of Baphomet. Think about that. A demon invented under torture in 1307 had no visual form for 500 years. Then, in 1854, an occultist drew a picture based on nothing but his own imagination. And now, when you think of Baphomet, you think of Lévy's drawing, not because it's accurate, not because it's historical, but because it's iconic. This is how legends evolve. A torture confession becomes a name. The name becomes a mystery. The mystery becomes an image. And the image becomes more real than the history that spawned it. Levy's Baphomet spread through occult circles. In the late 1800s, a British occultist named Aleister Crowley adopted Baphomet imagery. Crowley was the founder of Thelema, his own religious philosophy. He saw Baphomet as a symbol of spiritual enlightenment and individual will. Crowley even took Baphomet as one of his magical names. He wrote about the Templars as mystic heroes. He claimed they'd been persecuted for possessing secret knowledge. He portrayed their destruction as a tragedy, a loss of ancient wisdom, and he inverted the narrative entirely. In the original Templar trials, Baphomet was evidence of heresy, proof the Templars had abandoned Christ. But to Crowley and other occultists, Baphomet became a symbol of rebellion against dogma, a figure representing freedom, hidden knowledge, and the path to enlightenment. The demon that was supposed to prove the Templars were evil became proof they were enlightened. By the early 1900s, Baphomet had become a fixture in occult literature. Tarot decks, grimoires, esoteric texts, and then, in the 1960s, the Church of Satan made him mainstream. In 1966, Anton LaVey founded the Church of Satan in San Francisco. He was a showman, a provocateur, and a philosopher. He didn't believe in a literal devil. To LaVey, Satan was a symbol, a representation of individualism, rational self-interest, and rebellion against arbitrary authority. And he needed an icon. He chose Levy's Baphomet. LaVey adopted the image wholesale. He made it the official symbol of the Church of Satan. The goat-headed, androgynous figure became the logo. It appeared on medallions, altars, literature. And suddenly, Baphomet wasn't just an obscure occult symbol anymore. He was the face of Satanism. The irony is overwhelming. A demon invented by the Catholic Church to destroy the Templars had become the mascot of the Church's greatest symbolic enemy. Baphomet had come full circle. But the story doesn't end there, because by the 1970s and 80s, Baphomet had escaped even the occult world. Heavy metal bands discovered him. Black Sabbath, Venom, Slayer. Bands looking for imagery that shocked, that represented rebellion and darkness. The goat-headed demon was perfect. It didn't matter that most of these musicians had no idea where Baphomet came from. It didn't matter that he wasn't a traditional demon from Christian theology. He looked evil. That was enough. And so Baphomet became part of pop culture. Then came the 2000s, video games, movies, horror novels. Baphomet appears in Diablo, in Doom. He shows up in films like The V-Witch as a visual shorthand for ancient evil. Most of the writers using Baphomet have no idea he was invented in a torture chamber in 1307. They just know he's the goat demon. And that's all they need. By 2015, when the Satanic Temple unveiled that bronze statue in Detroit, Baphomet had become something bigger than any single interpretation. To Christians, he was still the devil. To Satanists, he was a symbol of individualism. To metalheads, he was just cool. To activists, he was a legal tool, a way to challenge religious privilege by demanding equal representation. To historians, he was a torture confession. Everyone projects onto Baphomet what they want to see, and that's what makes him immortal. He's a blank canvas, a mirror. You see in him what you bring to him. The Templars are dead. The torture chambers are gone. The trials are history. But Baphomet is alive. And the question is, why? Why does a demon that never existed still have such power 700 years later? Part of the answer is the image. Levy's drawing is simply unforgettable. But part of the answer is the mystery, because Baphomet isn't the only mystery surrounding the Templars. There's still the question of the treasure, and there's still the conspiracy theory that refuses to die. The theory that says the Templars weren't destroyed, they escaped, they took their gold, and they founded Switzerland. Let's talk about Switzerland. Specifically, let's talk about the Swiss flag. It's simple, a white cross on a red field. Now look at the Templar flag, a red cross on a white field. Same colors, inverted. And according to one of the most persistent conspiracy theories in European history, that's not a coincidence. The theory goes like this. When King Philip arrested the Templars in France on October the 13th, 1307, some of them escaped. The arrests were coordinated, but not perfect. Templar strongholds in other countries had warning, and a few Templars, maybe dozens, maybe hundreds, slipped through the net. They took the treasure with them, the legendary Templar gold, the wealth they'd accumulated over 2 centuries of banking, donations, and land holdings. They loaded it onto ships, onto wagons, and they fled. Some went to Scotland, some to Portugal, some to Germany, and some, the theory claims, went to the Alps, to Switzerland. The Swiss Confederation, a loose alliance of Alpine cantons, was officially founded in 1291. That's 16 years before the Templar arrests. But conspiracy theorists argue the real founding of Switzerland as we know it happened after 1307. That the surviving Templars reorganized the Swiss cantons, brought their military expertise, their banking systems, and their treasure. And that the Swiss flag is a coded message. A deliberate inversion of the Templar cross, a signal to those who know, we survived. Is there any evidence for this? Let's look at the arguments. Argument 1. Timeline coincidence. The Swiss Confederation was founded in 1291, but it was a minor alliance of 3 cantons, Uri, Schwyz, and Unterwalden. Just a mutual defense pact. But in the early 1300s, something changed. Switzerland began to expand. New cantons joined. The military grew stronger. By the mid-13th century, the Swiss were defeating much larger armies, including the Habsburgs, one of the most powerful dynasties in Europe. How did a collection of Alpine villages become a military power? Conspiracy theorists say, Templar training. The Templars were elite soldiers. If they brought their knowledge to Switzerland, it would explain the sudden military success. The problem, there's no documentation, no records of Templar knights in Switzerland, no evidence of a sudden influx of foreign military expertise. It's possible Swiss military success came from geography. Fighting in mountains is different from fighting on flat land. The Swiss developed pike formations and defensive tactics suited to Alpine warfare. But the conspiracy theorists counter, of course there's no documentation. If the Templars fled in secret, they wouldn't have announced themselves. Which brings us to the second argument. Argument 2. Banking. The Templars invented international banking. Switzerland became the banking capital of the world. Coincidence? Here's what we know. Swiss banking as we know it didn't emerge until the 1700s, centuries after the Templar suppression. But Switzerland did develop a reputation for financial stability earlier. By the 1500s, Swiss mercenaries were paid reliably. Swiss merchants were trusted across Europe. And by the 1900s, Swiss bank secrecy laws made Switzerland the place to hide money. No questions asked. Numbered accounts. Total discretion. Conspiracy theorists ask, what if those secrecy laws were designed to protect Templar gold? What if, somewhere in the vaults of Zurich or Geneva, there are still accounts that trace back to 1307? The problem: Swiss banking secrecy was formalized in 1934. It was a response to Nazi Germany, not medieval Templars. But again, the conspiracy theorists counter, that's the official story. The secrecy laws were just codifying practices that had existed for centuries. And here's the thing, Swiss banking secrecy makes this theory unfalsifiable. You can't prove there isn't Templar gold in Swiss banks, because the whole point of Swiss banking is that you can't prove what's in the vaults. The perfect conspiracy theory is one you can't disprove. Argument 3. Neutrality. Switzerland is famous for its neutrality. It doesn't take sides in wars. It hasn't been invaded since Napoleon. Why? The official answer is geography and diplomacy. The Alps are defensible. Switzerland made itself useful as a neutral meeting ground. But conspiracy theorists suggest another reason. What if Switzerland's neutrality is protected by a secret agreement? An ancient pact between the Templars and the Catholic Church? What if the Pope knew the Templars had escaped to Switzerland, and in exchange for not hunting them down, the Templars agreed to remain neutral, to never again challenge the Church's authority? It's a beautiful theory. There's no evidence for it, but it explains why Switzerland has remained untouched for so long. Argument 4. The Swiss Guard. Here's an odd historical fact. The Pope's personal army is made up of Swiss soldiers. The Swiss Guard has protected the Vatican since 1506. They're the only people allowed to carry weapons in the Pope's presence. Why Swiss? The official answer is that Swiss mercenaries in the 1500s were the best soldiers in Europe. Pope Julius II hired them for their reputation. But conspiracy theorists see something else. What if the Swiss Guard is a remnant of a deal between the Templars and the Church? A permanent Swiss presence in the Vatican as part of a peace agreement? Again, no evidence. But it's strange, isn't it, that the Catholic Church, which destroyed the Templars, trusts Swiss soldiers above all others. Argument 5. Geographical evidence. The Swiss Alps are the perfect hiding place. Remote valleys, defensible mountain passes, caves, fortresses, and there are Templar-era ruins in Switzerland, commanderies, administrative centers the Templars used before their suppression. Some of these sites are in the mountains, far from major cities. Conspiracy theorists argue, if you were fleeing with gold, where would you go? Somewhere remote, somewhere you could defend, somewhere you could rebuild in secret. The Swiss Alps fit perfectly. The counter-argument: those Templar sites were built before 1307. They're not evidence of escape. They're evidence that the Templars had a presence in Switzerland before the suppression, like they did everywhere in Europe. And after 1307, those properties were transferred to the Knights Hospitaller, not hidden, officially documented. So what's the truth? Did the Templars escape to Switzerland? Here's what we know for certain. Some Templars did escape. That's not disputed. Not every Templar in Europe was arrested. Some fled to Scotland, where they were protected. Some went to Portugal, where they were rebranded as the Order of Christ and allowed to continue. It's not impossible that some went to Switzerland, but the idea that they founded Switzerland, that the Swiss flag is a coded Templar symbol, that Swiss banks hold Templar treasure? There's no evidence. No documents, no confessions, no letters, no records of Templar leadership in Switzerland post-1307. What there is absence. And humans are very good at filling absence with story. We want the Templars to have survived. We want the king to have been outsmarted. We want the treasure to still exist somewhere, hidden, waiting to be found. Because the alternative, that they were simply destroyed, their gold seized or scattered, their order erased, is unsatisfying. It's tragic, it's brutal, it's boring. So we create a better ending. We create the escape, the secret survival, the hidden kingdom. We create Switzerland. And the thing is, the theory is unfalsifiable by design. You can't prove Swiss banks don't have Templar gold because of banking secrecy laws. You can't prove the Templars didn't influence Swiss military tactics because it would have been secret. You can't prove the flag isn't a coded message because symbols are open to interpretation. The absence of evidence becomes evidence of absence being hidden. That's how conspiracy theories work. They take historical gaps, things we can't know, and fill them with narrative. And the Templar Swiss conspiracy is a perfect example. It explains things that don't need explaining. Swiss military success, Swiss banking, Swiss neutrality. All of these have prosaic historical explanations. But the conspiracy version is more exciting, and excitement is more contagious than truth. So the theory persists. 700 years later, people still believe the Knights Templar are hiding in the Alps, guarding the gold, waiting. For what? No one quite says. But the image is powerful, and power, not truth, is what makes a legend last. Let's jump forward to the 20th century. By the 1960s, Baphomet had fully entered pop culture, but he was still mostly confined to occult circles. Crowley's writings, LaVey's Church of Satan, esoteric books and niche communities. Then heavy metal discovered him, and everything changed. In 1970, a British band called Black Sabbath released their debut album. The cover featured a woman in black standing in front of a ruined house. Inside, the lyrics spoke of darkness, war, and the devil. It was the birth of heavy metal, and metal needed imagery. By the 1980s, bands were competing to see who could be the most shocking, the most satanic, the most visually extreme. Baphomet was perfect. Venom, a British band, used Baphomet imagery on album covers. Slayer referenced demons and occult symbolism. Smaller black metal bands in Scandinavia took it even further. Some band members claimed to actually worship Satan. Most of them had no idea where Baphomet came from. They just knew he looked evil. The goat head, the horns, the pentagram. It was instant visual shorthand for rebellion, for darkness, for "this will upset your parents." And it worked. The 1980s saw the satanic panic, a moral panic in the United States, where parents, churches, and media became convinced that satanic cults were infiltrating society. Ritual abuse, human sacrifice, devil worship, none of it was real. But the panic was real, and Baphomet became the face of it. He appeared in TV news segments, in testimonies by supposed survivors of satanic abuse, later debunked, in warning pamphlets distributed by churches. Parents saw the goat-headed demon on their kids' album covers and assumed the worst. And the more the culture panicked, the more appealing Baphomet became to teenagers. Because if authority figures hate it, it must be cool. By the 1990s and 2000s, Baphomet was everywhere. Video games. Diablo, one of the most popular games of the 90s, featured demons heavily inspired by Baphomet imagery. Doom, Quake, Darksiders all drew on the goat-headed demon aesthetic. Movies. Horror films used Baphomet as visual shorthand for ancient evil. The Witch, a 2015 film set in 1630s New England, features a goat named Black Phillip, who's revealed to be the devil. The imagery is pure Baphomet. It's always the goat. Because Levy's drawing is so iconic, so immediately recognizable, that filmmakers don't need to explain it. You see the goat head, you know this is the demon. But the most interesting modern use of Baphomet isn't in entertainment, it's in activism. In 2013, a group called the Satanic Temple was founded. They're not devil worshippers. They don't believe in a literal Satan. They're atheists, but they use satanic imagery to make a legal point. The Satanic Temple's mission is to challenge religious privilege, specifically Christian privilege in public spaces. Here's how it works. If a government building displays a Christian monument, say a Ten Commandments statue on the lawn of a state capital, the Satanic Temple demands equal representation. They demand to put up a statue of Baphomet. In 2015, they commissioned that bronze statue in Detroit, the one I mentioned at the beginning, 8.5 feet tall. Baphomet sitting on a throne with children looking up at him. It was designed to be installed next to a Ten Commandments monument in Oklahoma. The point wasn't to promote Satanism. The point was to force a choice. Either allow all religious monuments or allow none. Most governments choose none. The Ten Commandments statue gets removed. The Satanic Temple wins, and Baphomet becomes a tool of secular activism. It's the ultimate inversion of his origin. He was invented to destroy, to justify persecution, to prove heresy. Now he's used to defend religious freedom. The demon created by the church to attack its enemies is now a weapon against the church's privilege. And it works because Baphomet scares people. The image is powerful, visceral. When the Satanic Temple unveils a Baphomet statue, it makes headlines. It terrifies Christians. It delights secularists. And it forces conversations about the separation of church and state. Today, Baphomet is no longer just a demon. He's a symbol, a tool, a brand. He appears on t-shirts, on jewelry, on tattoos. He's in memes, in TikTok videos, in discussions about religious freedom, about occultism, about the aesthetics of darkness. He's become infinitely interpretable. To some, he's the devil. To others, he's enlightenment. To others, he's just cool art. He's a Rorschach test. You see in Baphomet what you bring to him, and that's why he's immortal, because he doesn't have a fixed meaning. He's not tied to a single religion, a single text, a single interpretation. He's whatever you need him to be. Villain, hero, symbol, joke. He's been all of them. And the reason he can be all of them is because he started as nothing. He was a lie told under torture, a name without a form without a history. And that blankness is what makes him powerful. Because if he's nothing, he can be anything. That's the secret of all great myths. They're not built on truth. They're built on absence. And humans can't resist filling absence with meaning. So why do we believe? Why does the Templar conspiracy persist? Why does Baphomet still feel real to so many people, even when we know he was invented? Why do humans turn torture confessions into religions? Let's talk about the psychology. 1. The underdog appeal. The Knights Templar were destroyed, arrested, tortured, burned, their order dissolved, their reputation annihilated. It's a tragedy, and tragedies demand redemption. We want to believe the Templars survived because we want to believe the bad guys didn't win. We want to believe that somewhere, somehow, justice prevailed, even if it's secret justice. This is why conspiracy theories often center on underdogs. The Templars, JFK, Princess Diana, people who were victims. We want them to have won in the end, or at least to have gotten the last laugh. It's emotionally satisfying, and emotional satisfaction is more powerful than historical accuracy. 2. The secret knowledge trap. Humans crave hidden knowledge. There's a reason mystery novels are popular. There's a reason we love plot twists. Our brains are wired to seek patterns, to solve puzzles, to feel like we've discovered something others missed. Conspiracy theories offer that feeling. They say, there's a secret. Most people don't know it, but you can know it. You can be one of the enlightened few, and the Templars are perfect for this. They were warrior monks with secret rituals. They had private initiation ceremonies. They accumulated wealth and power. Of course, they had secrets. And the leap from they had secrets to they had the secret, ancient knowledge, hidden wisdom, the key to enlightenment, is small. Once you believe they possessed something valuable, it's easy to believe they hid it, and that it's still out there, waiting to be found. 3. The unfalsifiable theory. The best conspiracy theories are ones you can't disprove. If I say, the Templars escaped to Switzerland with their treasure, how do you prove me wrong? You'd need to search every Swiss bank vault, interview every Swiss family, excavate every mountain cave. And even if you did all that and found nothing, I could say, well, they hid it better than you think. The absence of evidence becomes proof of how good they were at hiding. This is the logic that sustains conspiracy theories. The lack of proof isn't a problem, it's a feature. It means they were smart, they covered their tracks, they kept the secret. You can't disprove it. And if you can't disprove it, it remains possible. And possibility for some people is enough. 4. Pattern recognition gone wrong. Human brains are pattern recognition machines. We evolved to see patterns because it kept us alive. If you see a shadow that looks like a predator, it's better to assume it's a predator and be wrong than to assume it's nothing and be eaten. False positives are safer than false negatives, but this also means we see patterns that aren't there. We see faces in clouds, meaning in coincidence, connections between unrelated events. And the Swiss flag looks like an inverted Templar cross. Is it a deliberate symbol, or is it just a coincidence? Our brains want it to be a symbol, because symbols mean something. They tell a story. Coincidences are boring, so we choose the story. 5. Narrative hunger. Here's the truth about the Knights Templar. They were arrested, they were tortured, they confessed to lies, they were executed, their gold was seized. The end. That's the story, and it's unsatisfying. There's no twist, no redemption, no hidden treasure, no escape, just brutality, greed, pain. That's a bad story. So we write a better one. The Templars escaped. They outsmarted the king. They took the treasure to Switzerland. They survived in secret. They became the Freemasons. They guard ancient knowledge to this day. That's a good story. It has mystery, intrigue, a hidden truth waiting to be uncovered. And humans will always choose the better story over the true story. Because stories are how we make sense of the world. And a world where the bad guys win, where heroes die screaming, where greed triumphs, that's a world that doesn't make sense. So we rewrite it. We create the conspiracy, not because the evidence points to it, but because the alternative is unbearable. 6. The Baphomet effect. Baphomet is different. He's not a historical conspiracy, he's a cultural one. No one seriously believes Baphomet is real in the way they believe the Templar treasure might be real, but people act as if he's real. They draw him, worship him, fear him, use him. Why? Because symbols don't need to be true to be powerful. Baphomet represents something. To some, he's rebellion. To others, enlightenment. To others, evil. He's a container for ideas. And the fact that he was invented, that he started as a torture confession, doesn't make him less real. It makes him more flexible. Because he's not bound by history. He's not limited by scripture. He's not defined by a single tradition. He's whatever we need him to be. And that's more powerful than any historical demon could ever be. This is the secret of all modern myths. They're not ancient. They're new. Slender Man was invented on the internet in 2009. Within 5 years, children were stabbing each other for Slender Man. The Illuminati, as we know them today, were popularized by a satirical novel in the 1970s. Now people genuinely believe they control the world. Baphomet was drawn in 1854. Now he's eternal. Myths don't need to be old. They just need to be useful. And Baphomet is useful. He scares people. He attracts people. He makes people feel something. And feeling is belief. So what's the truth about the Knights Templar? The truth is this. They were warrior monks who got too rich and too powerful. A king wanted their money. He tortured them until they confessed to devil worship. They were executed. Their order was destroyed. There was no Baphomet. There was no Swiss escape. There was no hidden treasure. There were only men and pain and lies told to make the pain stop. But we made those lies real. We needed the story to be more than good men destroyed by greed. We needed mystery, magic, meaning. So, we created it. Eliphas Levi drew the demon in 1854, 500 years after the Templar trials. He had no historical source. He just liked the name. He imagined what Baphomet might look like, and his drawing became the truth. Freemasons claimed Templar lineage with no evidence. Occultists turned torture confessions into enlightenment. Conspiracy theorists found patterns in Swiss flags and banking laws. And now, 700 years later, Baphomet is more famous than the Templars ever were. The demon that never existed has outlived the men who were tortured into confessing to him. That's the real horror. Not that torture creates false confessions. We already knew that. The horror is that those false confessions can become real. They can become symbols, religions, movements. They can become more powerful than the truth that spawned them. Baphomet was born in a torture chamber in 1307, but he's alive in 2024. Alive in statues, in songs, in video games, in conspiracy forums, in courtrooms, in church protests. The Templars are dead. But the lie they were forced to tell became a god. Maybe that's the real lesson. In the war between truth and story, story always wins. Because truth dies with the people who lived it. But stories are immortal. And demons, it turns out, are the most immortal stories of all. Baphomet will outlive us. He'll outlive our children. He'll outlive everyone who knows his origin. Because origin doesn't matter. What matters is what he means now. And right now, he means whatever you need him to mean. That's not history, that's mythology. And mythology doesn't end. It just evolves. The goat-headed demon sits in that warehouse in Detroit. Bronze and permanent. Children looking up at him with something that could be wonder or could be worship. 700 years ago, Templars screamed his name in torture chambers. Now we build him temples. The lie has won, and maybe that's exactly what we wanted all along.